Welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-host, Dr. Sylvia Bank. Between our two households, we're navigating life with 10 children, so we know how chaotic parenting can be. As Johns Hopkins trained pediatricians, we also know the science. Our goal is to bring you the best of both worlds, medically sound, trustworthy advice, and practical, real-world insights as we dive into the trials and triumphs of parenting. Please note this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
Vivian, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to focus on infants, and we're going to talk about bottle feeding, which is something almost every parent considers. Even if you're breastfeeding, oftentimes you supplement with something from a bottle.
So I know you've had a mix of both your birth children and your adoptive children. Why don't you comment about bottle feeding and your experience?
Yeah, like you, I worked after a couple of months of being at home with my children. So all of my children at some point got used to taking breast milk from a bottle. And then some of those also I supplemented with formula. And then one of my adopted children who came to us very young was bottle fed.
Yeah, I worked after my maternity leave. So there was pumped breast milk, and all of my children took bottles as well that were given to them by my husband, by my mother. So different caretakers were feeding them via the bottle during some point in their infancy as well. Sometimes I get the question in the office, which bottle system should I use? And when you go to the grocery store, there are a lot of bottles to choose from, right?
Yeah, with really varying cost too.
Right.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming.
So when people ask me which bottle should I use, the answer I usually give is whatever your baby will take. If they will take the cheapest one, just buy the cheap ones. If for some reason your baby is struggling with a bottle, a wider nipple, that has anecdotally been said for people who do breast and bottle feeding, like that combo. And those brands that I commonly see patients using are either the Avent system or the Como-Tomo system. There's also another brand called Dr. Brown's, which actually is more like the standard thinner bottle, but they have a reservoir from the nipple down into the bottle, so that kind of vents through this channel down the bottle, and that has anecdotally been advertised as an anti-gas bottle. But personally, I don't really recommend any system, and I say patients should just use whatever their baby takes, right?
I agree. And start with whatever you have. If you already have something from a previous child, most likely your subsequent child will take that as well. I think when you're trying to supplement with bottle feeding while also breastfeeding, some of the fancier bottles, it probably doesn't matter that much. I actually also never needed the wider nipples, which do mimic the shape of the breast more than the more conventional nipples, but I never had a problem switching my children back and forth. So it's always reasonable to just start with like cheap and easy, and it's likely that your child will take it. What I find makes more difference in how the baby takes the formula or breast milk is the nipple flow rate. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So any bottle system that you purchase, the hole in the nipple controls how quickly the milk comes out of the bottle. Most systems have 5-tier flow rate. So oftentimes that first slow flow, some brands call it the preemie flow. It's just a really slow flow for like that newborn who it takes longer to feed. You don't want them to get overwhelmed with too much milk per gulp. And then of course that increases up to flow 5, which is bigger, larger infant can more efficiently finish a bottle quicker with a 5-flow nipple.
Yeah, and you can see this if you look at the nipple, but certainly if you kind of test it on your wrist, you'll just see the difference in how much comes out.
And parents ask me, should I go up? Should I not?
Right. I think of, in my mind, if the nipple flow is too fast, you kind of see like milk is dribbling out of the mouth. The baby might be like shaking their head or like spitting it out or even coughing on it. And then you know like, oh, okay, let's go back. Right. If the nipple is too small, you might see where the baby is sucking and they're just like almost frustrated, like they want to be going faster, and then it's reasonable to try the higher nipple. It's, these are gross generalizations, but you kind of tend to read your baby, your baby so well, and know
that they're ready for something else, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to review when people are thinking about bottle feeding is this thought of sterilization.
Okay, so let's start with bottle care. Sylvia, can you explain that to our listeners? And I'm going to share the CDC website at the same time if you want to see it more visually.
Yeah, so sanitizing or sterilizing, really the recommendations I see are only for infants that are under 2 months of age. they're premature or they're immunocompromised. So it's a really finite period of time that most parents are really going to be sanitizing their bottles and their equipment. So in order to sanitize, they recommend to disassemble all parts of the bottle. You must wash all the items with dish soap and rinse before sanitizing. And then you need to air dry to prevent introducing any bacteria through a dish towel if you're towel drying. So air dry all items. There are several methods of sanitizing bottles. One of them is by purchasing a bottle sanitizer or bottle sterilizer, which is an appliance that you can purchase. It sits on your counter and it'll sterilize all items related to bottle feeding. These appliances can be a little bit costly, but they are very convenient because it's fast and it's easy to do. Another option is by using a microwave steam bag. These are less expensive, maybe $1 per steam bag. You get 30 uses per bag, where you pop your items in there, put a little bit of water, and in the microwave for about 3 to 5 minutes, and all items are sterilized. This is a nice, inexpensive way to sterilize your items, but limited capacity because the bags are not that large. People can do the old school method of putting all your bottled items into a pot, fill it up with water, put it on the stove, and bring it to a rolling boil for 5 minutes. And that sterilizes the baby bottles. And lastly, there's chemical ways of sterilizing, either with bleach or sterilizing tablets. And that can sometimes be more convenient if you're traveling and you need to sterilize things on the go. So this is only a short, finite time for most parents, up to 2 months of age.
Yeah, and after 2 months, not premature, not immunocompromised, you can go to using the dishwasher. And then again, on the CDC website, you can find even more details on what cycle to use on the dishwasher, where to place the pieces, how to air dry them, like you said, not using a dish towel, or even cleaning by hand, and what you want to do if you're cleaning by hand.
Yes, the last question that I usually get in the office related to bottle feeding is when someone is breastfeeding and they're planning on going back to work, or they're planning to have in-laws or babysitters give a bottle every now and then, when should they do that introduction of the bottle? And my recommendation to breastfeeding parents is to do it at around 1 month of age. Sometimes if you don't introduce the bottle earlier on and you're trying to get them to take a bottle when they're older, there can be difficulty with babies not taking the bottle if they're a little bit older, 2 months, maybe more like 4 months, and they refuse to take the bottle if it's not breastfeeding. So 1 month of age, even if you don't need to give the bottle, that's what I recommend. And the baby can take it then and then go back and forth between breastfeeding and bottle feeding.
Yeah, and for me, I would introduce 1 feeding a day, not very much, just enough for the baby to get used to the sensation or become familiar with it. And that 1 month, you've established your milk supply, you and your baby have established your routine and breastfeeding.
So in the second half of the episode, I want to focus more on formula and the questions and recommendations we have for that. All right, so in the second half, I want to focus on formula. What is formula? What types of formulas are out there? And some recommendations we have when mixing or feeding baby formula.
Yeah, and we need to take a particular caution for infants that are younger than 2 months old and are on formula, similarly for infants that are premature or immunocompromised in any way. So we're going to refer people to a really nice infographic the CDC has on this. I'm going to pull that up to share.
Yes, almost all infant formulas come in 2 different versions. One version is an already mixed called ready to feed. Like you open the container, pour the ready to feed formula directly into the bottle and feed that directly to the baby. These liquid formulas are sterile, so there's less fear of introducing any bacteria like Coronabacter in the ready to feed formulas. And any newborn parent can opt for ready to feed formula because they know that it's safe and it's sterile.
Yeah, and here on this infographic, it does say use liquid infant formula if possible because it is sterile. However, if you're using powdered infant formula, let's prepare and store it safely. So let's talk about that.
Yes, and one reason why someone would choose to use powdered formula over the ready to feed is that there's a significant price difference between the two. You are able to give an infant under 2 months of age powdered formula, but you have to do it very carefully in order to avoid bacterial contamination with Coronabacter. So what you do is the formulas come in a powder, and on the can, it tells you how to mix the formula. So you pour the water in first to the given amount that you want to mix, and then you put the appropriate scoops of formula into that water. And that way you know you're mixing it at the right concentration for the baby to feed.
So the steps, as you can see on this infographic, are you boil your water, even if it's bottled or sterilized water, you boil it so that it gets to the boiling temperature, let it cool for about 5 minutes, put it into your clean bottle, and then add the formula so that the heat of that water is killing anything that could be present in the formula powder.
Right. And then you wait until the formula comes down to a safe body temperature in order to feed it to the baby, right?
Right. That's super important too. Make sure it cools down. Yes.
And when your child is over 2 months of age, who's not premature or not immunocompromised, the rules really relax on this, where you can use tap water. First of all, you look at your local state health department guidelines. Tap water is safe for human consumption, and you can use tap water to mix your formula. Some people choose to use bottled water. They also make nursery water or distilled water to mix your formula. And some people do an extra step with tap water where they prepare tap water, bring the cold tap water to a boil for a minute, then they cool the tap water to room temperature, and then within 30 minutes use it to mix the baby formula. So a lot of this like boiling water, sterilization guidelines relax after the baby is 2 months of age.
Yeah, let's talk about actually using and storing prepared formula. So let's talk about that.
Right. So the rules for feeding formula are the prepared formula must be discarded within 1 hour after serving a baby. So if the baby has been served the formula and the feed is lasting forever, if the feed lasts for more than an hour, that formula needs to be thrown away. Prepared formula that has not yet been given to the baby, so it's just been mixed and it's ready to go, that can be stored in the refrigerator for 24 hours in order to prevent bacterial contamination, heated to the proper temperature, and then given to the baby within 24 hours. An open container of ready-to-feed formula should be covered and refrigerated and discarded after 48 hours if that is not used.
Yeah, and if your baby doesn't finish the entire bottle of formula, then you need to throw away what's left over, which is always a heartbreak too, because your baby may consistently take 6 ounces at every feed, but then all of a sudden they only take 2 and they're pushing you away and they fall asleep. And then what do you do? And you have to waste that formula. So.
Right. Yeah. But following these rules, then you'll know that there isn't any type of risk of bacterial contamination in the formula for your baby. So why don't we move on to discuss individual formulas? When you go to the baby food aisle, there are so many different colors, so many different brands, so many different types.
Yeah, I think we should start by talking about what makes us as pediatricians feel confident in recommending a formula to you and considering it safe. And at the top of the list would be that it is FDA approved. And here are the reasons for that. So all infant formulas are required by the FDA to meet strict evidence-based nutrition requirements designed to get them as close as possible to the nutritional profile of breast milk. That's number one. Secondly, the FDA also requires infant formula manufacturers to follow what's called good manufacturing practices, which ensures that the formulas are safe and free from infectious agents. And then thirdly, the FDA conducts regular inspections of both products and facilities so that if something goes wrong, they can then recall the products. Some of the problems, if you have a formula that is not regulated by the FDA, then obviously you don't have those safety measures in place to ensure that it's meeting the nutritional standards. And if that formula is being imported from another country, because there are many you can buy online from other countries that are not FDA approved, then you also don't have the regulation that the way it's being imported is safe in keeping the formula free of any infectious agent during import. And you don't have that added benefit of knowing that if there's a problem discovered at that plant, it's going to be quickly communicated to you as the consumer or to your pediatrician that it needs to be recalled. So this is just the first step in thinking about formulas, and it actually gives us a really good launching point to talk about this, because the FDA refers people to a site put out by the North American Society for Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition. That's a mouthful. We refer to it as NAFSCAN, and it's an infant formula guide, which I'm going to screen share. But all that to say, we would feel like the most important thing is that it is FDA approved, so you have the peace of mind that the safety standards are being monitored, and if there is any concern, that you will easily and quickly be notified.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want people to be aware of when it comes to formula. So formula is made of 3 different components: carbohydrates, fats, and protein. And the thing that infants are most sensitive to at this age is actually the protein content of formula. So a lot of differences that you see in the different formulas that are out there are pretty much all based on different kinds of protein content. And most formulas out there, the protein in the formula is made from cow's milk, right? Cow's milk dairy. Most every infant comes out of the nursery with your just standard basic formula. And when you go to this NAPSGAN site, you can see all the different types of standard cow's milk based protein.
Right. Look at all of these.
Yes.
This is so overwhelming. These are basically interchangeable. They are all standard milk protein. And when you look at this is funny to me too. When you look at private label, these are all made by the same company. That's all of these store brands. So you could have Aldi, Amazon, Costco, CVS, HEB, Kroger, et cetera, et cetera. This has got to be 100 different formulas represented here. So you have abundant FDA approved options, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And typically from the nursery, you'll be either given Enfamil NeuroPro or the Similac version of that, which is the Similac 360 Total Care. So those are kind of your basic formulas that you start off and try. And in this list, there's actually a couple of formulas that I sometimes recommend a change for. The formula maker will take that cow's milk protein and partially break down some of the cow's milk protein. The theory is that it's easier to digest because, as I mentioned, it's the protein content that infants often struggle with. So these formulas are advertised as being for gassy babies. The 2 formulas that I usually recommend is either the Enfamil Gentilese or the Similac Total Comfort. And these are formulas where they take the cow's milk protein and break down the protein component a little bit to theoretically ease abdominal discomfort. The other one that I typically recommend is babies who have spit up, babies who have reflux. And Enfamil makes a product called Enfamil Added Rice, AR, and then Similac Spit Up. Yeah, so these are also cow's milk protein formulas, but those are kind of geared towards babies that have a lot of reflux and spit up. It doesn't actually increase the caloric content of the formula, given the fact that there's added rice. What it does is it's still the same viscosity as regular mixed formula. You can still use your same flow nipple to feed your baby with this formula, but after the formula hits the acid of the stomach, it thickens up and it kind of settles in the stomach to prevent that refluxing and spitting up. So as a pediatrician, those are really the only 3 formulas that I recommend during this time. And of course, store-bought equivalents as well. But there is this thought of a lactose-free formula, which doesn't change the protein content. It changes the carbohydrate content, which is the lactose. But lactose intolerance isn't really a problem in infancy. If infants were really truly lactose intolerant, then they couldn't even tolerate breast milk. So it's not really a formula switch I usually recommend during this infant phase where they're a little bit gassy, a little bit fussy, or a little bit spitty.
Yeah, and I'll say, we're just highlighting Similac and Enfamil because this list is so huge and those tend to be the most commonly used. Like you said, you can find similar products in the private label lines. I do want to point out, all of these formulas are so similar to one another that they are safe to substitute for each other. Now, we obviously wouldn't recommend that. You pick one, your baby sticks to it, but it just gives you an idea that they're so similar.
So the next one that I usually recommend is actually a soy-based protein, where the protein product is not based on cow's milk, it's based on soy. And I will recommend a soy-based protein formula for parents that want to avoid animal products. So vegan parents that want to raise their children vegan, a soy is a good alternative. And those that I usually recommend are either the Enfamil Prosobi or the Similac Isomil. But as you see, there's private label and Good Start as well.
Yeah, much more manageable list. Mm-hmm. I will say these other categories, The extensively hydrolyzed and certainly the amino acid based, these are discussions to have with your doctor when all of these other options are not working. So we're not going to highlight those in this brief overview about formula, but we will talk a little bit about goat milk.
If a parent wants to do goat milk or a reason behind goat milk, if it's an FDA approved formula like Bubs or the Cabrita, I don't have a problem with them choosing goat milk for their baby.
Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating, Sylvia. I got this paper journal in the mail. Here, I'll show you. Look at it. Goat versus cow's milk. Does dairy base matter in formulas? And it's really talking about how goat milk has gained enough interest and popularity that there's a lot of research being done on it. So I think that we can look forward to in the future understanding more about goat milk. But certainly, as we highlighted it on the NAFSCAN website, there are safe FDA approved options if parents want to try goat milk.
Great. So hopefully in this episode, we kind of reviewed for listeners what bottle feeding is like, what the recommendations for sterilizing or sanitizing bottles is, and how we can do that safely. And also in the second half, outlining formulas, like how we mix formulas, what are the risks with formulas, and how we can choose a formula that's right for our babies.
Great. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin.
And I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.